Welcome back, everybody. This is Chris, and today this is part 3 of our lightsaber build from beginning to end. And today I'm going to go over some of the tools that we're going to use for this project. Start off with some PPE, personal protective equipment. These guys always want to use safety glasses when building, when soldering, because you just never know when something is going to go flying, and the last thing you want to do is end up with something really bad in your eye. Safety glasses first and foremost. Safety first, no matter what you do. Next thing we're going to look at here is a couple of tools that I like to use. Wire trimmers. These trim wire all the way up to like 30 gauge wire. So we're going to be using a lot of different gauge wire. We're going to be using 24 gauge wire. We're going to be using probably 28 gauge wire for this build. Maybe the 32 gauge wire we'll see for the switch assembly, but these are really important. Wire cutters, and also you can use it. It's got a little trimming tool on it as well. Very important. Some wire snips maybe. I like to keep these handy. These come in handy. Not necessarily a tool, but these are really important. This is heat shrink for your soldering, for soldering wires together. This is an assorted pack with a whole bunch of different sizes, as you can see. I got this on Amazon really cheap. Very important when you're doing soldering and wiring to use your heat sink. Another item that I bought off of Amazon is this guy. This is metric and inch. These are Allen wrenches, and a big set of Allen wrenches. A lot of builders and designers will use Allen wrench nuts and screws in all of their builds. So it's important to make sure you have all of the right tools and all the right Allen wrenches. So getting yourself a really nice set. This was like 20 bucks on eBay. Actually, I don't even think it was that much, I'll be honest with you. It was fairly inexpensive. Frog tape, the painter's tape. This is frog tape. I use this for all sorts of things. I use it for taping down parts if I'm going to be doing some soldering. Use it for building blades, and it's removable and doesn't hurt anything. So this green painter's tape, very important in your builds. Comes in handy for all sorts of things. Next up, I'm going to show you is this guy. It's just a nice little screwdriver set, Phillips and flathead screwdriver set with a couple of needle nose pliers. I use this for a lot of different things, but always good to have yourself a nice little set of screwdrivers and needle nose pliers handy when you're doing a build. Next up is a voltmeter. I use this to test switches and current to make sure my wiring is correct. These are pretty cheap. You can get them for like 10 bucks. But this one is really nice. I've had this for a really long time, and it comes in handy. Again, none of this stuff is really all that expensive. Get it a little bit at a time. That way it won't really won't really affect you too much. This is a little, the table clamp that I use. I use this for soldering. I'd use this for a lot of different things. I can put a PCB inside the clamp, put it on my table here, and do some soldering and making sure everything that I'm trying to solder doesn't move. These clamps come really important. This is a really small one. I wish I had a little bit bigger one, but this really does come in handy. Next thing I think is really important. These are little helping hands, guys, and what this does is it's a little device that'll allow you to, put wire so you can solder things together. It sits on the table. It's adjustable. Really helps you out because you only have 2 sets of hands and you're trying to solder with two. These guys, with your 2 hands, these serve as 2 of your other hands. So there's helping hand things. It's highly adjustable. Goes up, goes down. Very important to have one of these when you're doing soldering. It'll hold the wire in place for you, and it makes life so much easier. Next thing on the list is electrical tape. And what I like to use is this white electrical tape. I don't use it very often, but I do use it for a whole bunch of different things. but I like to use white electrical tape instead of black. Just there's a lot of white parts in these things, and sometimes electrical tape really comes in handy. So that's kind of important. Don't use it very much, but it does come in handy. It's always good to have a nice little extension cord. For our next couple of items here, a Dremel. This is probably the most important piece. I mean, everything really here is important, but this really comes in handy because this will help you sand items, cut items, really do just about everything you need to do. In one of my other videos, notice they had those little PCBs. When those are printed out, they're printed out on a big sheet and then they're snapped apart and it leaves some residue behind. And sometimes those little PCBs don't fit in the holders very well. With a Dremel, you can use a little sanding bit and sand all that stuff down, and it really doesn't, takes no time at all. Dremel's really good for cutting and doing all sorts of things. I make blades using my Dremel, everything. And then what you need to do is go buy yourself a nice little Dremel kit with all a bunch of different cutters and sanders, and these things again are cheap, like 10 bucks on Amazon. Very, very simple. And then PTFE wire. I think wire is really important. You don't want to use the silicone wire, and the reason for that being is when you start to solder, that soldering iron gets really hot, and what it'll do is it'll melt that silicone wrap on the wire, and it'll start to to retract a little bit and expose more wire, and that's really kind of the last thing you want to do. You want to have your insulation on this wire going all the way onto the board or wherever you're trying to solder. The last thing you want to do is have any chances for grounding or anything like that. So PTFE, it's got, I get 28 gauge, but I have some 26 as well. For power, I use 24. I use 2 strands of red, 2 strands of black for my positive and negative for power. And I have some 32 as well, which is really, really thin. But sometimes you really need to do that because you don't have a lot of room in your build. The 32s I use for switches and stuff like that. But this one, it comes like in a variety pack with different colors. This one had 6 colors. I'm down to 5 because I've used quite a bit of it. But then it's always a good idea to kind of keep a lot of your extra wire handy. So if you trim it off and you keep it and put it in this little bag, you have a bunch of extra wire left over, and maybe you just need a little piece. And instead of having to cut through the roll, you keep your scraps, and then you have a whole bunch extra handy. That's easy to get to, and well, you don't have to keep cutting, bringing your cutters out. You're all ready to go. One of the last things I want to talk about is glue. I use a bunch of different glues making lightsabers. I use the Gorilla Glue a little bit. I'm not a big fan of super glue, but I kind of like the Gorilla Glue. I use it sparingly, only in certain places. I also use the E6000. That stuff's pretty cool as well. But that takes a long time to set. With the Gorilla Glue, it sets within just a few minutes. And then I've also used like a metal epoxy. That's really nice. But that's a little bit pricey. I've used that to put magnets on plastic and all that kind of stuff, because sometimes metal doesn't glue well to plastic. So that glue, that metal glue works out really well. And one of the last things I want to talk to you about is a soldering iron. Now, you don't have to break the bank. Look, I mean, people will go out there and tell you got to spend 40, 50 bucks on a soldering iron. You don't. You just need a soldering iron that gets hot. I've built a bunch of different lightsabers, and I've built it with a $13 soldering iron. Don't have people go out there and tell you got to spend all this money. What's really important is you really got to go out and get yourself a nice set of solder with flux already built in. This makes your life really easy instead of having to use flux and then solder. Spend a little extra money, get yourself a nice set of solder with flux already in there, and it makes your life so much easier. It's easier, it's cleaner to use. And then, like I said, you don't have to go out and buy a $50, $100 soldering iron. This was 13 bucks, and I've used it a lot. I can't tell you a lot. Soldering is a skill. It takes a little bit of getting used to. With this soldering iron, it took me a while to find the sweet spot to where I felt like it was getting the solder at the perfect place. Not too hot, not too cold, just about right. It took me a while to do that, and it takes a little practice. But for 13 bucks, you can't really go wrong. And if something happens to it, it doesn't cost you all that much to replace. This particular set came with a bunch of different tweezers, came with a stand, it came with its own wire that I didn't really use. It came with its own solder too, that I used when I first got it. Came with some solder tape removal stuff that you can use, and a bunch of extra spare heads for your soldering iron. But again, don't spend a lot of money. You don't have to. I mean, it's not like you're going to be, unless you're starting a business and you want to use all the best stuff, then sure, go ahead. But, if you're just building a couple lightsabers, you don't really need to go out and spend a whole lot of money. That way, if something, like I said, if something goes wrong and it doesn't help, it doesn't work for whatever reason, it breaks, you're not out a whole lot of money. And then finally, I have a Night Core lithium ion battery charger. You can go out and get your own battery chargers. I've got another a charger that I use that's like a wall charger, but this one's pretty nice because it allows me to put in two lithium ion batteries at once and charge two lightsabers at once. I also have a custom made adapter for this. So it's like a fake battery with a positive and negative pole with a wire coming out of it that goes into the 1.3 millimeter recharge port. So I don't need to have all of these different battery chargers. I just have this one, and this was really nice. It slowly charges the battery. This is like an overnight battery charger, but it doesn't destroy the battery. It takes really good care of it. This was a little pricey, but for the most part, really nice battery charger, and I really like it a lot. That's about it for now. Those are some of the tools that, obviously there's some others that we use along the way, but those are the big ones. I keep everything I have in a box and take them out when I need it, and I keep it handy. And the other thing too, I want to show you is from an organizational standpoint, I have one of these guys. This is, a nice little plastic container with all my spare parts in it. These are pretty nice. They keep everything nice and organized for you. And for me, I don't have a lot of room in my house. I don't have a lot of space. I've got a really small house, and it, some of this stuff really does take up a lot of room and a lot of space. So for me, I try to keep everything as condensed and organized as I can. And getting these little plastic dividers, you can get these at the dollar store. You can get these fairly cheap at the dollar store, like Dollar General, Family Dollar, those kind of dollar stores. And then you can have all your parts in here, keep everything all nice, neat, and organized, and you can get the things really quick. And again, it doesn't take up a lot of space. I hope this helped a lot. Thanks for joining me on part 3. We're going to be getting there. Like I said, I've got 2 more orders coming in. Once those orders come in, we can start building. One of the orders is from Shapeways, and that includes my 3D printed natural bronze crystal chamber upgrade pieces. There was 3 of them. And then also 3D printed in plastic internal chassis, which holds the Profi board, the switch assembly, and of course the battery. And that should be here end of September, first week of October. So we're getting close to that. But hopefully we'll have the hilt here as well. We'll have the hilt here within a couple of weeks. That way when that shows up, we'll really give you an idea as to what this whole project is going to be, how it's going to be assembled, and all that stuff, and then we'll get going. I don't think I'll probably show you every step along the way as far as soldering and all that goes, because that stuff takes time. I'll show you some highlights, so a lot of these videos going forward might be a lot shorter, which is good because I know your time is important and you've got other things you want to do, and the last thing you want to do is listen to me ramble on for hours. But anyway, again, I appreciate you joining me for part 3 of this. Hope you found this helpful. If you liked it, like the like button down below, subscribe, leave me a comment. I'll get back to you. And I hope to see you again really soon for the part 4 of my lightsaber build from beginning to end. Roman props, MK1, Ben Kenobi, Star Wars lightsaber. Thanks, guys. Have a great day. We'll see you next time.